Welcome to the Doomer Optimism podcast. This is Jason. Today, we are going to be talking about building an edible perennial nursery. I've kind of hinted before on this podcast and other places that this is something that I'm planning to do within the next couple of years. And so I've been doing kind of a lot of research and experimenting on my own. And while doing this, I happened to come across a really great YouTube channel called Living Soil Tree Farms. Just a lot of very helpful instructions from somebody who's been doing this for a few years and is learning as he goes as well, but is already really doing a lot. And that's Wrenn. So, hey, Nick, how's it going?
It's going good. It's going good. Glad to be here today.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, why don't we start by, so we're going to talk about again, what it takes to build an edible perennial nursery. We'll probably talk about why somebody would want to do this. Why do we care about trees? Why do we care about edible trees and edible perennials more broadly? And we'll get into a lot of different things, but why don't we start, if you want to just give a brief background, how you kind of came to, want to work outside a lot, work on the land, work with trees, all of that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's a whole long story, but in a lot of ways, I feel like I kind of came out of the box, like right out of the womb, having an attachment to nature and specifically to trees. It's just something I've always felt pretty strongly, but growing up, I didn't really know what to do with it. It was just like part of who I was, but it didn't seem like it was something that would fit into like how I would make a living, if that makes sense. I come from a family. Three of my four grandparents were farmers and got off the farm. And the one grandparent that was not technically a farmer, like grew up around riding horses and tons of animals. And like, I basically consider all four of them farmers. And so the family progression was definitely like agriculture work is like going backwards. And I say that's kind of was my impression growing up. Now I feel like I have a lot of support from the family for what I'm doing, but growing up, that was definitely my perception. And so, I basically followed the footpaths of my parents, right? And so I went to college and my dad was an engineer. I had no idea what I wanted to study. And so went to engineering and feel really grateful to have had the chance to get that degree, but kind of throughout the process of getting the degree and then working in the field after graduating, I was like, it really started to dawn on me, like, this is not what I want to do for the rest of my life. And it was a challenging time for me, kind of really fully coming to that realization and being like, crap, like what do I do now? We all
Yeah.
got to eat. So one of the things that had become clear to me as I pursued that degree was that I wanted to work outside. I like did not want to be trapped in an office. And so I went with civil engineering because, I had basically this realization happened kind of in the middle of my college experience. So I didn't want to like lose all the progress of prereqs that I'd taken. I started out mechanical engineering and was like, nope. So I pivoted to civil because it would at least allow me to be outside on construction projects. And I've always had a big interest in like mechanical stuff, cars, trucks, big equipment. So it was kind of a way to be around some stuff that I thought was cool and be outside. And then as I came to the decision of like, all right, I got to find a way to get out of civil engineering, I knew I still wanted to work outside, but it had become clear it wasn't simply outside. It was like outside around plants, like in nice natural environments, not just like outside on a construction site, obviously very different from like being in the woods. And so I knew plants was what I wanted to focus on, but where in plants, I had no idea. And so I had kind of saved up some money. So I had a little bit of a like nest egg or whatever, like, and I quit my job. And COVID happened almost at the same time. Didn't plan it that way, but between quitting and I was lucky enough to live at home, so my bills were pretty low. And I had a period of time during COVID to really just think, what the heck do I want to do? And I started spending a lot of time out in the woods where I had played as a child, hanging out in the woods, and really just talking to the trees and being like, what the heck am I doing here? What the heck are you guys doing? Like, what is going on, And there's a whole lot that happened. It kind of just momentum kind of snowballed, and I just spent as much time as I could consuming information during that downtime in COVID. I was watching YouTube videos, I was reading books, I was doing a little bit of online, some trainings and stuff. And one experience after the other, it just led me to a point of like, I know I want to do something that involves land, so I've got to start getting my hands dirty and just trying stuff out. And so I had the opportunity to move down to North Carolina where my grandparents, they don't live there anymore, but they have some farmland. And I was just trying all sorts of stuff. I know we're here today mostly to talk about the nursery, but when I started, I wasn't sure if it was going to be more the nursery paying the bills or more like I'm really into seed saving, so I thought I was going to be a seed farmer. I do kind of consider myself a seed farmer, but that doesn't pay the bills at all. Right now, it's kind of more of a hobby, passion thing. And then I'm also really big into compost, so I was really doing a lot of work trying to figure out what would it take to get a compost operation started up. And it turns out of all three of those things, that's the compost requires the most financial input at the start
Yeah.
to be doing it at scale. I do a lot of like backyard composting. But anyway, so I was just doing everything I could to like learn. And so, like I said, taking a lot of online trainings. I volunteered at a ton of different farms, just getting experience all over the place and trying to make connections. And over time, I learned a lot about myself. I learned, compost at scale, kind of too expensive for right now. Seed farming, a lot of work in the heat, doesn't really pair well with my physical ability.
Mhm.
And the nursery just kind of came out and it really shined. It was like the peak workflow of the nursery happens when it's not as hot. I'm really passionate about trees and breeding, so it just feels true to something I want to do. And it feels like sometimes it's challenging to get access to the demand for the plants, but in general, I feel like the demand for those plants is there. And so it feels like I'm kind of responding to a need or something that it's not just me that wants this. There's a lot of other people that want this sort of stuff too. So that's kind of that's the trajectory that I am on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what is it like? So I'm assuming that people listening to this, they might be interested in planting trees or even propagating, seeds themselves. Or at least I would hope so. Of course, you can go buy a $30 or $40, $50 grafted fruit tree, somewhere. And that gets expensive real fast. When I started here, so I've been on this land for about 5 years, about 5 acres in Western North Carolina. And, the two places to get trees basically are this grafted fruit tree nursery about an hour away, and then local extension has a sale once a year, right? And
Mhm.
so local extension, they started offering a few like hardwoods like serviceberry and chestnut and persimmon. I was like, oh, okay, that's interesting. But there's just a lot of people don't seem to know about all of these other options besides grafted fruit trees, right? That they want to plant like in their suburban backyard or something. And so I guess, how did you get, when from the point you decided to, okay, I'm going to do this, to like, okay, but I'm actually going to propagate these and sell these to make a living. And okay, I want to build a website, start a YouTube channel. I imagine it's kind of difficult at first to kind of get any traction or get any kind of market. Because like you said, there's a demand out there. It certainly seems like there's a demand, especially if you ship, say, out of the region. But is there also a thing of like creating the demand, like telling a story, convincing people that actually we do need more of these edible trees in the landscape, and we need, genetic diversity. And so planting from seed is often a good idea. How did you kind of get over that there seems to be like this initial chasm that you have to cross to actually
Yeah.
make it a living?
No, definitely. I definitely agree. Yeah, I feel like that's one of the most important pieces if you want to like do this as a living is yeah.
Yeah.
And I got a lot of inspiration from folks here on YouTube like Sean over at Edible Acres and Akiva Twisted Tree Farm, and kind of saw the way that they, are just very honest when they're on their YouTube channel, and they do kind of tell a story and promote. It's not like they're trying to come up with a story. It's just like their
Yeah.
relationship with the trees is a story, and they're telling that.
Yeah. I mean, you can tell that they love their craft and they believe in
Yeah,
it. And you can't
definitely.
really manufacture that. It has to be
Right.
legit. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Hard to manufacture that. And so I feel like that is true for me. Like one of the first trees that I really got into before I started the nursery was black walnut. And
Hmm.
I just really fell in love with black walnuts. And then that really got me kind of hype about foraging. And I started learning about all the other native trees that you can forage from in this part of the world. I think I also got a lot of inspiration from like Nate and Dusty over at the Experimental Farm Network, and the way that like on their seed website, I don't know any other seed company that's telling as much of a story about the seeds that they offer. And I remember getting so much enjoyment and information about the seeds that they offer just from reading these like paragraphs long descriptions that they have. And so I definitely, when I was making my website, I tried to really give a lot of information on the website, and also in the YouTube. I like talking, I like articulating what is going on and how I feel about it. But I think getting over that hump, I might approach it differently if I had to do it again. But I think not knowing where it was going to go, I just started trying, and I went with the model of like diversity. I'm going to grow a rather wide diversity of plants and just kind of throw a bunch at the wall and see what sticks. And it was interesting once I got down in North Carolina, that's when I really started scaling up the tree. I had like kind of fiddled around with a few air pruning beds before that, but I really scaled up when I got down there to North Carolina. And I found that a lot of the larger native trees, the nut trees, the walnuts, the oaks, the hickories, those were kind of harder to sell. And I think part of the reason is that you need a lot of space for them. A lot of people who are interested in this don't have a lot of space. And so like the smaller trees, like fruit trees people are more excited about them. But what I did learn pretty quickly, because I wasn't doing any conventional fruit. I wasn't doing like peaches or apples, but I had like some wild plums, Chickasaw plums, and some pawpaws. And those were like impossible to hold on to. Like you advertise that you've got them and they were just like gone. And so I that was kind of like a learning moment. Just like, yeah, there's different, and I'm sure it's going to change with time. Like I think pawpaw has a lot of hype right now, and I'm not convinced that it's going to stay that hype for that long. Maybe it will,
Right.
but it is definitely super. And I don't think it's a bad thing that it's popular. I think it's good. It's like kind of crazy how popular pawpaw has gotten.
Yeah,
It
it's so
kind of,
unique, and it's a native to this region. And it's so unique
yeah.
in terms of just what it tastes like, and you can't, it's like a mango and a banana put together. It's
Yeah,
like it's
it's a
great. Yeah,
wonderful plant. Yeah, it's crazy. There's nothing quite like it. Well, definitely there's nothing like it here. If you go to the
yeah,
tropics, maybe you could, find some
yeah,
similar fruits. Yeah, so a lot of it's just trial and error. I think I had at first I was really focused on the online model of just like shipping plants out bare root.
yeah,
And just because I didn't want to fiddle with pots, just the plastic and the moving stuff around and, but a couple of my friends recommended that I start trying to sell stuff on Facebook Marketplace and Craigslist and just see what happens, which I hadn't thought about. And that was also, I think, really instructive. It was interesting to see local demand because then it's like online, most people just buy a tree from me. Sometimes people reach out with the email and we talk a little bit, but for the most part, it's just like I get an order, I ship it. Whereas in person, they come and we talk. We kind of exchange stories. I mean, sometimes people are in a rush, but for the most part, you have like a real conversation when people come to the nursery. And so that was cool getting to see people and hear from them specifically what they're interested in, or like, oh, I've had a really hard time finding this or that. And then I think it's one of those things where you've got to, like I said, just get in and try it, and you keep building each year. It's not something that's going to happen like overnight. And like I mentioned at the beginning, if I was going to do it differently or if I was going to do it now, I think I would be tempted to recommend to folks pick a plant that you're really excited about, and grow a lot of those, because even if there's not a lot of demand for them, you're excited about them. And so you will enjoy the process of like trying to like get people interested in them, and then do a little bit of diversity to kind of just test the waters.
mm-hmm.
And I would also say, I really think that like I'm really passionate about the nut trees, the persimmons and all that, but I think what is consistently hot over the years are smaller woody plants that produce food. So like the hazelnut, wild plum, elderberry, pawpaw, anything that's like sub 30 feet tall and
Yeah,
produces food and is native, is like there's a lot of demand for that. And I feel like it's not only that there's a lot of demand, there's just not a lot of people growing them,
yeah,
honestly.
yeah,
It's hard. It can be challenging to source, and especially if you want either local ecotype or if you want like improved cultivars of these things.
mm-hmm.
Like, it's easy to like find some big nursery that's growing like hundreds of them out, several states away from you.
Yeah.
It's harder to find locally, yeah, appropriate seed selections for what you want.
Yeah, well, there's so many directions I want to take this conversation. But first, I wanted to ask you this: black walnut. Sell us on black walnut. So we have some
Yeah.
black walnuts. Everybody complains that black walnuts kill other trees and that they're hard to process and they're messy. Sell us on black walnut. Why do you love black walnut
Yeah.
so much?
I'll do my best. I will do my best. Just right off the bat, like, for whatever reason, the videos that I've made about black walnuts on social media have been some of the videos of mine that have gotten the most traction. And one of them, like the most frequent comment that I get, other than people laughing about like the tool that I pick them up with, that's called a nut wizard. You get a lot of jokes about, the nut wizard.
Yeah.
But I get like a gajillion comments of people saying like, you can't plant near a walnut tree, or you can't use
Mhm.
those husks for compost because it'll kill your garden. And like, I've just never seen that to be an issue in
Mm.
reality, in nature. Like there definitely are some studies out there, like jungleone, the toxin in the,
Yeah.
that is potentially causing issues. That is a real thing. It is in the walnut trees. It decomposes really rapidly in natural systems. So like in a lab, you can subject plants to it, and it can, it can kind of harm the plants, especially plants in the nightshade family seem to be the most susceptible.
Yeah.
But in out in nature, I just don't see. So like I use the black walnut husk and I compost with them, mix them with wood chips, let them sit. I put it on my garden, and there's no problem.
Mhm.
And so I a lot of people are really concerned about that, and I think it's just one of those things that's been propagated, for like an idea
Mhm.
that's been propagated a lot. And so like you
Mhm.
hear from someone you trust, and they're telling you that this black walnut tree will kill your plants. You're like, I don't think that people are lying when they propagate this idea. It's just people have heard it so much and kind of repeated it, and it's easy to believe. But anyway, so the fun part of the black walnut, why I actually like it, for me, a big part of it is taste. I just think the black walnut taste to me is superior to the English, or what's the other word? The English walnut, the one we get in the store. It- and maybe some people disagree, but I just think the taste is amazing. And I will say the taste changes from tree to tree. There's sometimes subtle, sometimes not so subtle differences tree to tree. And one of the things I like to point out to people here, because a lot of people will say, oh, black walnuts taste awful. And I think a lot of people have tested them without curing them. And if you don't cure them for like, I used to say 3 to 4 weeks, I actually think really for some trees, they need to cure a lot longer, like several months. And curing just means that they're drying thoroughly, and it really dramatically changes the taste. Like I'll eat a fresh black walnut off the tree, and I won't mind it, but I don't love it. Whereas like a few months down the line, it's delicious. It's like totally different. So the taste is a big thing for me. The other big thing is just like in terms of nutrition, like the calories, the fats, the proteins they produce and how easily they produce them. I mean, the entire eastern half of this continent grows a stupid
Yeah.
amount of walnuts, and we just
It's
don't
an
utilize
abundant
them.
resource that most people ignore. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it wouldn't take that much to, to start building something, a society that's going to make use of this. The other thing, I definitely eat wild black walnuts, and I appreciate them. They will feed you. They are delicious. I really focus my efforts on improved black walnut trees. And this doesn't always mean like a grafted cultivar. I don't have any grafted black walnut trees that are mature in the landscape that I'm on. I mean, there's some places, if I could drive up to Pennsylvania to John Hershey's nursery, like I know where I can access some of those trees. But just through testing trees around me, I have found everywhere that I've moved, you can always find a tree that's slightly better. And the biggest thing for me is like I don't mind the dehusking. It's a messy process, but it's like in a day of labor, I can process enough black walnuts to last me for like more than a year. So it's the amount of like, yeah, it's work for one, but it's the amount of food you get for the work is like, to me, it's not a big deal, and it's enjoyable. But what's important is that the cracking of the walnut is easier. And so with a lot of the wild types, what you'll find is even if you get like a special black walnut cracker, because you can't just crack them with a regular like nut cracker, you need something pretty heavy duty. Even if you get the right tool, a lot of the times the nut will stay locked into the crevices of the shell, even though you crack it open. And if you, as you're collecting your nuts, keep them separate, which ones came from which tree, you'll find that some trees release the nut a lot easier once you crack the shell open. And once you identify those trees, like like this year, I only collected walnuts from one tree, and I collected almost every walnut on the ground from this one tree because I know that they crack out. Like they're not quite as good as these improved cultivars that have thinner shells and stuff, but they're dramatically enough better from the average wild ones that it just makes it so much more enjoyable to crack them in the kitchen. When you crack it once and you can get 3 or 4 big pieces come out, it's like huge difference. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Right now I just use a sledgehammer, and
yeah. That
I
works.
probably get half of the nut because I can't get into the rest of it.
Yeah, I have a
Yeah.
special rock that I use.
A special rock.
It's like rounded. It
Nice.
fits right in my palm.
Yeah. So if people want to get some nuts from this awesome tree, you sell trees, bare root trees, but you also sell seed as well.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so
Like this year, I've got seed available from that tree right now. Yep, yep.
cool. Yeah. Okay. So to broaden out again, this distinction between kind of local sales and online sales is kind of like it's this challenge because I think ideally we want to sell locally because it's our community. We want to feed our community. But I imagine that it's very hard to make a living just selling these trees locally. Maybe if you focus on these smaller woody plants that you're talking about, it's hard to sell people on big nut trees, even though we need a lot more big nut trees in the landscape. You know, you said space considerations. It's also time, right? Like to convince someone that they need to plant a hickory so that their kids and grandkids can enjoy it, you know, it might be a hard sell for some people, although they should do it anyway, but it might be a hard sell. But whereas smaller stuff might be easier. How do you, you know, thinking about kind of online shipping and local sales, you know, how do you think about that? I mean, ideally in 20 years, you know, there will be many more of these kinds of nurseries and we'll all, you know, every region will have a good nursery that can provide the people, and then online shipping will be more of a moot point, right? Why buy online when you can just buy locally? But you know, for now, there does seem to be, you know, a lot of people wanting to buy this stuff, and not very many nurseries selling, and they often sell out pretty quickly if they're the big name ones, at least. Yeah, how do you think about that? And if you don't mind, I'm curious, like do you have a kind of a percentage in mind of like how much you sell locally versus how much you sell shipping?
Yeah, yeah, I could calculate. I mean, that's a number that I wanna find out, and I have the data to find out, but off the top of my head, it's probably, like, 75% shipping and 25% local, and then but where it gets kinda blurry is that, just because of, like there are some people that I would consider local that I do ship to. Like, if they're, like, an hour to 2 hours away and we don't have the time to drive to each other, it still sometimes makes sense to ship. And, like, under the current "we have fossil fuels" thing, I do kinda consider those people in my community. You know, if we didn't have
Yeah,
fossil fuels, that would be probably
very
not
different.
considered my local community, yeah. But, so it's a good question. One of the things that I've explored this year is we started selling at farmers markets for the first time in the spring
Hmm.
locally, and it wasn't really something that I wanted to do, not something that I sought out, but a friend of mine had done it for several years, I believe, and then was kinda getting out of it just because he's got a lot of young kids right now, and, you know, they take a lot of time, and, you wanna spend time with the kids, obviously. So, I kinda plugged in his place, and what I learned from that is that I think if I wanted to do this and do local only, I think I could do it. But I think I would have to dramatically broaden the range of plants that I'm growing and include a lot of the herbaceous native plants, you know, the wildflowers and stuff like that, as well as probably doing some of the conventional fruit. Even if I wasn't gonna do grafted, like, just offering, like, seedling stone fruit, peaches and plums and that sort of stuff, and I think I could do it, but, I wouldn't be able to do as much of the species that I'm excited about, and I agree, like, my ideal is that within a couple decades, like, yeah, there's enough people in my local
Mhm.
community and enough land that should be planted, that if we had more you know, if people were more into this stuff, absolutely, I could totally you know, meet my needs selling locally. It's just that not enough people know what's possible. They're not as excited as I think they would be if they knew. Hazelnut's a good example, like, I don't know any local people who I have met who know about hazelnuts.
It's wild. Hazelnuts are such an awesome
It's
plant.
crazy. It blows my mind, you know,
They're like
and
a
I'm
little
over
protein
here.
tree.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm over here, like, you know, just I'm out doing my business, and I'm like, "Oh, that looks like a hazelnut tree," and I pull over and I collect,
Mhm.
like, a bucket of nuts, you know?
Yeah.
And, it's like, why are we not planting these everywhere?
Yeah. Like
So,
every
yeah.
hedgerow, you know, and they're not that big. You can plant thousands of them, you know, on a not that big of a property, a few acres, and just in the corners and along hedges. And yeah, that I'm excited about hazelnuts.
Yeah.
I'm planning to plant a lot more on my at my place. So yeah, go ahead.
They are no, they're a special plant, and I think too, you know, as like obviously like my ancestry is Europe, and like this is the American hazelnut we're talking about, so it's a little bit different than the European hazelnut. But like, you know, especially like northwestern Europe, historically, hazelnut was a really important food for our ancestors, and so like I definitely feel a strong connection to the hazelnut, and I'm just really excited to work with it more. I think one thing that I'm hopeful that like if we get this vision, you know, like a couple decades down the line where as a society we really are taking these plants more seriously. I do agree. Yeah, I hope there's less shipping and more local sales. I do think it would be cool if there's still a lot of seed going around in the mail
Yeah. Yeah.
to
I was
like
about to say that
yeah.
the one advantage of shipping is that there's probably a lot less chance that it's going to do well because it might not be adapted to your specific bioregion. However, there might be some plants that do very well that nobody has ever grown at that place. And that just, I think I'm not a, you know, I respect native plants, but I'm not a native plant zealot,
Yeah.
right? I do think that this kind of exchange has been happening for all of history. People moving genetics around. Yeah, and so you're saying, maybe not so much shipping of the actual trees, but still exchange of seeds for this kind of cross-pollination thing happening.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. And like more nurseries growing from seed and just see
Hmm.
like it's so much more efficient to like ship and buy seeds than it is to buy like the trees are so much more expensive than the seed. Now obviously
Yeah.
you need to learn how to grow the seeds. It's
Yeah.
more challenging to right than just like sticking a tree in the ground. Everybody can do that. But well, I think everybody can grow from seed. It just takes you have to have the interest to learn. I've heard several I think I've heard Akiva say this and I think the guy's name is Ken over at Oikios or Okios. I'm probably butchering the name, but were what they they're working towards more seed than actual trees. Like as they age, they won't have to be doing the physical labor of digging trees into their like 70s and 80s that they can be like they're doing that now, but they're also planting a lot of these trees at their locations so that in 10, 20, 30 years they're going to have tons of seed as well as food that they can then, distribute out to folks and just cuz the seed work is so much easier, so much more sustainable than like growing and digging the tree. It's a lot of work.
Yeah.
I'm in it right now. This is kind of like my peak. The past 2 weeks, and going into the next week or two is like the craziest time of year for me
Yeah.
digging
I
trees.
was I
And
was thinking about that. I'm glad that I appreciate that you made the time. I'm sure it's a crazy rush right now.
yeah, in a way, it's good because it kind of forces me to like at least take a morning that's a little slower.
Yeah.
It's a good little
Yeah.
break from the insanity of it all. Yeah, the other just one other thing so I'm pretty at my infancy with all this, right? Like I'm only 30 years old and I haven't been doing this that long, but listening to a lot of other folks like Buzz Fervor, some stuff that I've heard him say along the lines of seed, and also like how long it takes for some of these trees to bear seed and stuff. He likes to point out that before the ice ages, a lot of these trees existed further north than they do today. And
Mm.
so a lot of the times, like, because I think someone had asked him, like, how does he feel about people shipping seeds from southern regions up into northern regions? And I'm not a native plant purist at all. Like, I love native plants. I mostly do native plants, but I'm not a purist. And he's advocating for like, yeah, like a lot of these southern varieties, they actually can do pretty good in the north, and sometimes vice versa. Like they've moved around a lot over the past like several million years. I mean, sometimes it doesn't work, but you can be surprised. And the other thing is like, and it's not just Buzz, actually, a lot of people will say this, that the data that we have specifically for like hickories and oaks of how long they can take to produce, a lot of that is in nature with competition, like in a forest environment where there's not a ton of sunlight or like a marginal space where the soil is pretty poor. And that when you bring these trees into cultivation and you like plant them and mulch them, water, like take care of them properly, they can bear. I mean, it's not like a hazelnut or a peach that's going to bear, fruit or nuts in like 3 or 4 years, but like 7 to 14 years, you can be getting nuts off of some of the like walnuts and hickories and oaks and stuff, which is a long time. But I think a lot of people have this idea that like, oh, I'll plant this, I'll never get anything from it in my lifetime, and
Mhm.
depending on how old you are, that may not actually be true. You know what I mean? It's yeah. So like to throw that out there to encourage people to do more of that. Yeah.
Nice. Well, let's talk about kind of the nuts and bolts of your operation. So, like, what does your kind of year look like? Because for a grower like you, it really depends on the season. Do you want to take us through, like, maybe let's start, well, pick a time that you think is the beginning of the year for a grower. I was going to say January, but
Yeah.
that doesn't really make sense. Maybe it does. I don't know. So, like, take us through kind of like what the seasonal rhythms look like and what you're focusing on and at different points.
Yeah. I would say this might sound weird, but I would honestly start in August
Hmm.
because the end of August is when the seed really begins. Now, depending on like there are some things like the Chickasaw plum, for example, that I've mentioned.
Hmm.
They can fruit anywhere from June into August, depending on like each tree kind of fruits at a different time. But so not all of the seed collection happens after August, but for me, like that second half of August, that's like the line where like at the end of
Hmm.
August, the pawpaws start to come in, the hazelnuts start to come in. You roll into September, the chestnuts are coming, the walnuts, the oaks, the hickory, and then October is kind of the peak nuts on the ground time. And so if you're collecting your own seed and you want to do anything with nuts and a lot of native plants, that's the seed window.
Mhm.
And then the seeds need a cold stratification, usually, not all, but most of these species require, like, the seed has to go through winter to come out of its dormancy. And so you're going to fall into one of three categories. You're either collecting the seed yourself and you're stratifying them, which could either be done in a fridge or outside. So those are two categories: stratify in the fridge or outside. The third category is you're buying seed, in which case you want to at least have your ear to the ground to the sources where you want to buy from, because sometimes they list them now, sometimes they list them throughout winter, and so you got to be ready to, like, the genetics you want. There might
When
be
do
a
they
small
start?
number of
When do they
seed.
start listing them in your experience? Like, when should you start checking
Yeah,
things?
I would say like September is when I would
Yeah.
start checking with nurseries
Seems
that
like a
you're
lot of
into.
tree sales, at least for orders, start going out in September as well.
Yeah, and for
Yeah.
tree sales, I would say maybe even August. Like if we're talking just seed, that's typically a little bit later, like September, October. But for trees, some people start
Mhm.
posting their inventory in August, which is I do it too, and there's a lot of benefits to it, but there's also some challenges, which I could definitely talk about. But and the seed ordering is kind of an all year thing. So like right now, I have seeds in my fridge that I have not listed on the website yet. I've got a ton of
Mhm.
seeds that I listed earlier in the fall, but so like things kind of roll out as I have time, and I think a lot of other nurseries operate the same way.
Mhm.
I remember plenty of times where like the middle of January or middle of February, like I'll get a newsletter and I'm like, oh man, like so and so has chestnut seed that I want, and I gotta,
Right. You got to jump on it
quickly.
within 4 hours, or else it would be sold out.
It's crazy sometimes how
Yeah.
fast some of this stuff sells out. And sometimes it doesn't, right? Like sometimes stuff sticks around for a while. But and again, it's kind of that same trend of like the shorter plants, like the pawpaws, the Chickasaw plums, the hazelnut sells like that. Whereas like the
Mhm.
bigger, like the hickories and the oaks don't always, seed wise, don't always sell out as fast. But still I think jump on it when if it's something you
Right.
want. Yeah. So that's when I would say the season starts, because that's when the seed is happening. But it's
Mhm.
it's an interesting to say that it starts, because that's also where it ends, because fall is when I'm digging the plants. Like typically sometime in October I start digging. Ideally I wait for the trees to fully go dormant and drop their leaves, or at least change color of the leaves. Sometimes because of incoming weather or just scheduling stuff, I dig them a little bit earlier than that, and it's okay. And like I've said, fall is the busiest time. So I am gathering seed. I'm processing the seed, because there's a lot of things like the black walnuts where you got to process the husk off, or you got to get the seeds out of the pawpaws and persimmons. I'm storing them. In a lot of cases, I do fall sowing. So we're down here in the southeast where we can, for the most part, just plant our seeds in the fall.
Yeah. And you're in
And they
Virginia now, right? Because you
I'm in
mentioned you
Virginia
still out there.
now,
Yeah.
and I'm near Martinsville. I'm in a little town called Bassett, but Martinsville is the big town that people would probably know. It's like southwestern Virginia, right at the start of the mountains. We're like loosely 7B. And when I was in North Carolina, I was like north of Hillsboro, which is now A, I believe. It's
Yeah.
changed. Yeah, so we can fall sow a lot of our seeds, whereas people in the north and to some extent the mid Atlantic, they do stratify their seeds outdoors, but they kind of protect them from the super harsh winter. Like they kind of, yeah, there's a whole thing that goes into that. But yeah, so fall is chaos, because it's just everything all at once. It's the beginning and the end at the same time. And then winter is really slow, or it can be. In the southeast, we can still do shipping throughout a lot of winter. It doesn't get cold enough. Whereas up north, they kind of really stop at a certain point because it gets so cold. So I have some level of busyness with shipping, but the thing that keeps me busy in the wintertime is if I want to expand. If I want to
Yeah.
build more beds, I do it in the winter because it's not hot. That's when it's easy to like do the carpentry, move the soil, move the mulch, that sort of stuff. Spring gets busy because any trees that I haven't distributed, I've got to figure out what the heck I'm doing with them. Like, ideally before they leaf out, because it's easier to move them when they're not
Mhm.
leafed out. If we're talking about bare root, if I'm going to do any potting up to have local plants, sometimes I do pots for local folks. And so if I'm going to do potting up, that happens in the spring. The thing that gets crazy for me in the spring, there's also some sowing of seeds. Like there's some seeds that I can't fall sow. So I like chestnut seed can't freeze. So I have to sow that in the spring. So there's some seed sowing. But the thing that makes me really crazy in the spring is that I'm also doing my gardening stuff. So like I'm
Yeah.
also like growing a lot of my own food on top of the nursery work. Whereas like in fall, I'm not really doing anything in the garden. Maybe there's like some corn and squash to pick, but for the most part, the garden's kind of asleep. And this year, spring was really crazy because of the farmers markets. We were doing local markets and dramatically expanding how many potted plants we've had. So if you do potted plants, spring is insanely busy. If you do bare root plants, fall is insanely busy. So if you do both, they're
Right.
both busy.
Do you find that for local sales, people tend to buy more in the spring, just in general, or like,
Yeah.
even though many people say it's better to plant trees in the fall, a lot of people are kind of culturally wired to think about them in the spring.
No, definitely. I feel like especially May, like after Mother's Day, like people who are looking for potted plants, that is like almost the only time that they want to buy plants. It is like a
Yeah.
huge spike after Mother's Day, and
Yeah.
then it's like it
And then it's
not
done.
it's a trickle. After
Yeah.
that, you only get like farmers because they know that they
Mhm.
can, so a farmer might be like, oh, I want to plant some apple trees, and they might buy them from you in August or September.
Yeah.
Now, if for local people who are aware of bare root, they definitely want to buy
Mhm.
in the fall. So it's not like there's nobody locally, but again, it's probably that 75-25% rule roughly of like,
Yeah. So do
yeah.
you kind of like your bare root, is your rule like the ones you don't sell in the fall, you kind of save for spring, and your spring sale, even for online, is kind of the leftovers?
Yeah, it's evolved year to year. I think what I did last year is what I'm going to try to do again, which is that I try as hard as I can to sell them all in the winter. Like in an ideal world, I would get them all shipped by December, and
Right.
then I would have no trees left, and that would be sweet. I would really enjoy that. But no, in reality, I wind up having trees in the wintertime.
Mhm.
And I promote them all winter. I can't always ship. Like last year, there was like a 3-week period where we were so frozen I couldn't ship. But for the
Mhm.
most part, I can ship out some orders. It's just I don't get many orders January, February. Once we hit March, there's a lot more people are saying, "Oh, I can start planting now. Maybe I want to get a few more trees." And I do more advertising in March to try to kind of push that. And I do at that point, usually around March, I do a sale because I'm kind of motivated to get them out the door. I
Mhm.
don't want to hold on to them throughout the summer
Yeah.
because ultimately if I don't sell them or plant them, and I have there's only so many that I can plant. I'm growing thousands of trees. I can't plant thousands of trees every year. If I don't, my only option then is either to donate them, which I do donate a fair number of trees to local organizations, but other than that, I would have to either pot them up or like put them into a bed for another year, which is
Yeah.
a lot of, if we're talking about a lot of trees, that can get into a lot of labor. So I do try to get them all. There's like a big wave in the fall, and then it kind of trickles throughout
Mhm.
winter, and then a second wave in the spring is kind of my
Mhm.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I usually do a winter solstice sale as well. Like getting back to like listing the trees in August is kind of a challenge. You want to take advantage of a wide window where you are making the trees available to people. And so you start in August, but it's hard to count. Like you don't know
Yeah.
exactly how many trees you
You
have.
probably have to be conservative, like underestimate
Yeah.
kind of thing.
I do a really conservative guess. The other challenging thing is like you don't know what quality they are. Like you can get a rough count on stems and do a conservative guesstimate of how many trees you have, but then you dig them up and you're like, "Whoa, some of these are really big and some of these are not as big as I thought they would be." And so like the
Mhm.
grading gets complicated, and we're at the transition period now where I have limited inventory left from my August guess.
Mhm.
I'm more than 50% done digging the trees right now. And so by the end of next week, I'm going to push a huge inventory update where all of a sudden I've got tons of trees again. And so it's like there's a wave of sales August, September, and then there's a big wave like end of November when I update my inventory basically. And so to circle back, so now we're in spring. We've potted up any plants that we haven't sold or we've donated them. We've sown all of our seed.
Mhm.
We're pretty much done until fall. There's a little bit of weeding because you do got to stay on top of weeding, but I mulch pretty heavily, so generally weeding is minimal. It's manageable. It's not a ton. You don't want to ignore it, but it's not a dramatic thing. And then it's just in summer, the only thing I do is water plants. If I'm selling potted plants, I might be moving some plants around or like up potting and that sort of stuff. Especially for bare root, all I'm doing is watering. And I still feel, again, I feel busy in the summer because I'm growing a lot of food and we've got the chickens and I'm foraging and all that. But like nursery activity wise, there's not a whole lot that I'm doing in the summer.
Yeah.
So it's pretty, yeah.
Yeah. I
Summer's
mean, that's
almost the
pretty cool. Like,
vacation
I
time.
think a lot of people who have like a normal 9 to 5, would desire this kind of seasonal work where, yeah, it does get extremely busy at certain times of the year, but there's times to take a rest and to do other things that you enjoy. Um, that's cool. Let's talk about planting the seeds. And generally people do it in one of two ways. They plant them out in like garden beds that are with good soil and well mulched and all of that. And then they do air prune boxes. Let's talk a bit about air prune boxes. You have some great videos on your website about how to build air prune boxes. You go through step by step, extremely helpful videos. Do you want to talk about how you got into air prune boxes, what you like about them, their pros and cons, stuff like that?
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So I got into them almost exclusively through Edible Acres and Akiva Silver, Twisted Tree Farm. Because they do it and they both talk about it a lot on their YouTube channels. And I was like, oh, that looks awesome. That makes sense.
Mhm.
I guess I should add, so I have a little bit of conventional landscaping experience when I was younger, and so I'm very familiar with, like, potted plant roots going in circles at the bottom being a huge pain, and so to me, well, there and I think to most people, the major benefits of air printing boxes, and I'll kind of explain what they are in a second, but the main advantage is it prevents the root circling at the bottom of the pot,
Mhm.
and it keeps the taproot intact without any damage. So it produces really healthy root systems. The other major benefit to me is that it is easy to protect nut seeds or
Right.
nut seeds and also like stone fruit seeds because rodents go crazy for those seeds. Like if you want to grow hazelnuts, chestnuts, even like peaches and plums and stuff, you need to keep them protected from rodents. And the air printing bed is just like it's fully contained, and so it keeps the rodents out very, very effectively. The downsides to them, before I explain, maybe I should have explained what they are first, but the downside to them that I see, they are expensive. It requires wood and hardware cloth and labor to build them. They also are not connected to the earth, and so they need more water than like an in-ground bed will need. So there's kind of the watering and the expense. Those are kind of the major downsides. I also feel like we could get into a discussion of scale. Like, you can look at what Yellow Bud Farm is doing up north, where like they're using all of the like really good genetics and these species that we're excited about, but they're doing it at a scale that's like a state forestry nursery scale where they're growing like several 100,000 trees a year, which is awesome because they're getting them out there to big projects. But like, it would be very challenging to do that with air printing beds just because of the
Yeah.
amount of infrastructure you would need. They're just growing
Right.
them in the ground. It's just
How
easier
do they
for
protect? How does from critters?
think numbers. So just planting an absurd number
Yeah.
of seeds. But I think they also eat squirrel. I think they do some level of hunting
So
the
they like
squirrels.
trap them
Yeah.
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now squirrels are relatively easy to hunt. Mice and rats, on the other hand, more
Mhm.
challenging. So I think there's also again, it's just a numbers game and also encouraging. Like they say, they have a ton of aerial predators in the area that just like live there because there's so many rodents they can feed on and kind of keeps things in
Mhm.
check, and snakes and all that. So it's kind of a constant balance. And the thing that you've probably heard me say this in videos that I'll say all the time is like your rodent pressure, it doesn't just change from place to place. It's also year to year as the populations rise and fall. Like, and especially as you start doing more nursery work, the first few years you might be fine, and then all of a sudden they find out where you're at, and then
Mhm.
then you got problems. Yeah, but so an air printing bed, it can be made out of anything really. It's up off the ground, and the bottom is a mesh. So the bottom of the bed is exposed to air. You have soil in it. I build them out of wood, and I basically just make rectangular frames. I attach hardware cloth to the bottom, and it has a hardware cloth cage on top to protect the seeds. And then what happens is the root naturally grows down, especially for taprooted species. It grows like straight down. The young tip of the root, it approaches the end of the bed where it's exposed to air, and it dies back basically. But it's such a small tip of the root happening that it doesn't damage the taproot, and it just basically gives the tree the information of I can't grow anymore in that direction, so I need to kind of seal up the end of the taproot, make it intact, and then send out some horizontal feeder roots basically. So you end up with a tree like where if it's a taprooted species, it has a nice taproot that you can dig up without cutting it, without severing it, and it has a lot of feeder roots, and so it's just easy to transplant. They're pretty healthy trees. Now,
Yeah.
I do
The taproot's
also,
usually about like a foot, right? Because you usually make the
yeah,
box about a foot deep. Yeah.
yeah, and like you could go shallower, you could go deeper. I don't see a lot of reason to go deeper because the longer if the taproot's longer than a foot, it can be challenging to dig a hole for it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like some of these, like sometimes people will grow like hickories and taprooted species in those long pots that are like 2 feet long, and
Yeah.
it's like that's great. That's a hard hole to dig. Yeah. So I typically go with about a foot. And one thing, we've mentioned hazelnuts a lot, and I grow hazelnuts in air printing beds because it keeps them protected, and chestnuts as well. And the hazelnuts and also like wild plums and stuff, they don't often have a taproot. They can be more horizontal, spreading. And so I definitely will say they are a little bit more challenging to dig out of the air printing beds because when they're all taproots going down, they're
Mhm.
super easy to pull. They don't really conflict with each other. You just pull
And you also
straight
do
up.
risers as well, right? So you're like able to pull off the
Yeah.
riser to get kind of a little bit. You don't just have to pull them out from like the top. You can kind of get down a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. So it's
Yeah.
like it's usually two frames, and so you lift the top frame off, and so like half the soil is exposed, and you can get your shovel in there underneath the the bottom and lift them up. And yeah, the taprooted trees, it's like because they're so focused on down,
Yeah.
it's easy to pull up and they come out. Whereas like a hazelnut, they're all growing sideways, and so
Yeah.
their roots are really can get kind of tangled, and you wind up having to just you move slower, otherwise you're going to break roots with the hazelnuts. And you can tease them apart. It takes more time. It also, and I say this in all my videos too, it helps when anytime you're digging trees from any sort of bed, the more hydrated the soil is, the easier they are to kind of to tease apart. If the bed gets like I dug honey locust yesterday, the bed was dry to my surprise, and
Mhm.
it was a pain. Whereas all
Yeah.
the other beds like were for whatever reason they were more moist, and so they weren't as challenging. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any species that you just will not grow in air-prune beds just because it's too much of a hassle?
Yeah, I tend so like it fluctuates based on germination to some extent. So like
Yeah.
I'll sow a lot of my beds in the fall. I'll sow some more of them in the spring for any seed that couldn't go. And I pretty much only sow trees that have taproots. So like
Mhm.
pawpaws, persimmons, the nut trees, those all have taproots. Or trees that have a seed that's really vulnerable to rodents, like stone fruit. So like, plums, they don't have a taproot, but the seed is vulnerable. Pawpaw, they have a taproot. The seed is not vulnerable to rodents, but because they have a taproot. And in an ideal world, all my seed germinates, and anything that doesn't fit into that category, I grow in raised beds in the ground. The problem is that, if I have a bed that doesn't germinate for any reason, so the seed
Mhm.
rotted or a squirrel got in or whatever, like I have an empty air pruning bed in the spring. If I
Mhm.
don't have like hazelnut seed or pawpaw seed to put in it, I will sometimes put a species like black locust or red bud that I typically would not grow in an air pruning bed because they don't need the protection. I'll
Mhm.
just use them as a filler so that the bed is doing something that year. It just yeah. So there I don't think there's any species that I wouldn't grow, but I don't see there's certain species that I don't see any benefit to growing in an air pruning
Yeah.
beds. And it's
Yeah.
typically yeah, anything that falls outside of those categories really.
I think like your point about scale. So like a 2x4 air pruning bed, you can probably grow 1 to 200 trees in that. And so, you can do the math, right? If you want to, depending on how many trees you want to sell, say you want to sell 2,000 trees, then, that's 20 boxes or 10 boxes or something. And so it's just a matter of like how much, how many boxes you want to make. It does cost some money. It does take, they're not very, they seem pretty straightforward. Like I think most people with a circular saw and a drill, can put these together, which is nice. There seems to be a low barrier to entry to doing this. But if you want to become a nursery that sells like 10,000, 20,000 plus, that's a lot of boxes for
It's a
sure.
lot of boxes. It's a lot
Yeah.
of boxes. Yeah. Yeah. And there's a lot of different ways to go about it. But yeah, that's how I feel. Is like it's a very low cost of entry. I mean, I say like it is an investment to build them of time and labor, but at the end of the day, like a box costs you less than like $50 to build.
Yeah.
And if you scavenge for materials, you can build them for
Mhm.
almost nothing.
Yeah.
But even if you're buying all brand new stuff at the hardware store, like $50 ish to build a box,
Mhm.
and it should last like at least 4 years, if not longer, depending a little bit on your environment, the type of wood you
Mhm.
use and that. But like, so $50 and it's producing at least like, 50 to 200 trees a year, depending on the size for 4 years worth of trees. I mean, it's an insignificant cost. It's just that when you get into,
Yeah.
I
It's
want
like,
this to pay my bills,
yeah.
one bed is insignificant. 20 beds is like, now we're talking about more of an investment,
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just doing the math, like one box, 4 years, $50 to build. In 4 years, let's just say 100 seeds per year. It's 400 seeds. You sell each seed for $10. Let's say, might be more, might be less. That's $4,000 for a $50 investment. That's not bad.
Right. Right.
There's
It's
much
pretty
worse
good.
kinds of investment, for
It's
sure.
pretty, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's potent this time of year as I'm pulling the trees out. I'm like, man, it is really crazy. I'm like literally holding my year's worth of financial stability in my hands, with these
Yeah,
trees. It's like
right, right.
yeah, it's something.
But what do you think are what have been your biggest challenges so far and things that, new people coming in, would be good tips for them to know?
Yeah. I think some of my biggest challenges have been somewhat unrelated to the nursery.
Mhm.
One of my biggest challenges has been housing. Like I had and land
Yeah.
access. Where I had land access, there was no housing. And so like
Yeah.
having to commute out there was like, this, I do consider this farming. It's kind of a niche type of farming, but
Yeah.
it's important for the farmer to live pretty close to where the farm is, I think.
Yeah.
And so that has been a big challenge for me. And it's hard to either class. I mean, it's both land access and housing, because it's like
Mhm.
a lot of people have a challenge getting land access at all,
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm
Especially these days.
yeah, yes,
Yeah.
yeah. So that's a challenge, and I don't have a whole lot of useful advice. I mean, a lot of that, like your situation is going to be unique depending on what financial situation you're in and kind of just what your opportunities are. But in terms of like nursery struggles, I think meeting the demand or finding the demand has been hard. Like the demand is out there, but getting connected. And so like for me, it's been a lot of
Yeah.
social media stuff, which is a good fit because I wouldn't do the social media if I didn't enjoy it. And I've definitely encountered a lot of nursery folks who are getting started and like they don't want to do the social media stuff, which I
Yeah.
think is totally fine.
Yeah.
But it can be challenging without that. You have to have different strategies to like find the demand.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's hard to get. I think the advice is just like I said, try starting off with stuff you're passionate about, and
Mhm.
then doing each year a little bit more diversity, so you can kind of figure out what your customer base is after, and where you can find that intersection of what you like and what they like. I think a big challenge for me, something that I still struggle with, is grading the trees into different size categories and
Mhm.
deciding how much money to charge for each one
Yeah.
is a challenge. I always feel like I'm charging too much, whereas like all my friends are like, you're not charging enough. And so it's like,
Mhm.
and you're dealing with living inventory. They're
Yeah.
not all going to be the same. It's a range of sizes. And so like deciding where, like, what am I going to call my grade A versus my grade B? And there's, there's also stuff like when I dig all the trees right now, I can see how many I have this moment and I heal them in. There's always a chance that a few of them may die over winter, that, a mouse might get in and chew a few. So it's like,
And by
there's a
healing
lot
them, you
of,
just mean putting them, especially the roots, under a soil to kind of
yeah,
just sail for a while. Yeah.
yeah.
Maybe some mulch. Yeah.
And like up north, and also if even in the south, if you're at a big scale, a lot of people will take these into climate controlled rooms and like store them in sawdust over winter.
Yeah.
I'm not at that scale, and we're in the southeast where it's not that cold, and so I just store my trees outside. People always ask me if I do greenhouse stuff. Like, we have a greenhouse, but I don't use it for native trees at all because it's not necessary. So yeah, just keeping the roots. Like, I dig them all out of the bed because the air pruning bed is up off the ground. So it's not that cold here, but in winter it will get too cold and too dry for the trees, really. So I dig them up in the fall and then I basically just dig a hole in the garden where the soil is nice and loose and stick a huge bundle of trees in the ground together, cover them up with some mulch and soil, and that's what we call healed in, and I've got some videos about that on my website if people want to learn more.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, I mean, I guess the challenges for everybody are going to be different. They're going to be,
Right.
do you have access to land? Do you have a stable place to live? What kind of material can you get access to? It is nice that people do shipping. I think you had a video on this where, there's surprisingly not a lot of nurseries that ship seeds, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I can't imagine that just shipping seeds from a pure financial standpoint is that lucrative, in terms of just, effort going in, but it's really kind of just the love of the game. Like, you just believe that these genetics need to get out there. It seems like it's a labor of love. At least that's my perspective, not being a nursery yet. Do you want to talk a little bit about, why you've decided to sell seeds as well as trees? Like what does it mean to you, both from a financial standpoint, but also just from a philosophical standpoint?
Yeah, definitely. Well, from a philosophy perspective, like I said, when I got started into this, like the Experimental Farm Network was a big influence on me, and just this idea of biodiversity, and really like realizing, my whole life I've eaten orange carrots at the store, and carrots come in every color of the rainbow, and I didn't even know until I was like 20 something years old, right? And so like that diversity is held within the seed populations, and you really come to learn, like, it's not big organizations who are doing this.
Mhm.
It's like it's regular everyday people that out of passion are saving seeds that are important to them, and that's why we have the diversity that we have today. So
Mhm.
it's really important to me that I am taking part of that. And also I'm just tickled by diversity. So I'm just excited to save seed. Like, I'm excited to have all this diversity and figure out
Yeah.
ways to kind of like store it and spread it out there. And
Yeah.
get more people excited. So it's just something that I'm passionate about. It's also, although it's less financially incentivizing, it's way less labor in a lot of ways. I mean,
Mm,
there is a lot of labor in collecting and processing and, counting out individual bags and all that. Like it's time, but
mhm,
it's not physically challenging, if that makes sense. It's time
mhm.
challenging. Whereas digging trees is like physically hard. The seed stuff is just time. And so part of me is like trying to build towards, as I get older, I want to be able to do less shoveling. Hopefully I got a
Mm.
lot of shoveling left in me,
You're only
but
30. Yeah.
yeah. So yeah,
Yeah.
hopefully lots of shoveling
You've got
still.
time. I'm 42 and you have plenty of time.
Okay,
At
good.
least I
Yeah.
tell myself that because
Yeah, no, that's
if you don't
comforting to
have a lot
hear.
of time, then I certainly don't have a lot.
No, it's funny how, everyone's different. Like I spent a lot of
Mm.
time in construction and you see people that are in their 30s and 40s and they're going to keep working, but like their bodies are spent.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so like a lot of it is how you take care of yourself. Like I have a friend who's a farmer, his name's Doug. He's in his 70s and he's been a market gardener for I think his whole life. And like I think he's in better shape than I am. So I think yeah, it's possible to keep going for a while if you take care of yourself.
Yeah. Yeah. This might, be too personal a question. Do you have hopes of like starting a family and getting making it like a whole family business and stuff of that nature?
Yeah, no, I'm happy to answer that. I definitely don't have any plans to have kids right now. I do think about making it a family and community type thing. Like I would love to,
Yeah.
like so in North Carolina, the quote unquote family farm.
Mhm.
I guess this was 3 generations ago. My great granddad, he was like basically trying to start like a family business. Like he wanted it
Mhm.
to be a whole big family opera, and it was for a little while, and then kind of nobody took it on afterwards. But so I definitely I would love to get more of my family involved. I don't think I'm gonna have kids, but I'm open to it. There's no specific plans to do it yet, but that could change. But the thing that I'm really excited about is bringing more community in. Like
Yeah.
when I get to a point where I feel like I need to hire
Mm.
some more labor, I'd really like it to be more of a cooperative type thing where the people that are working are all owners of the
Yeah.
thing, And so that's the thing that I'm excited about in terms of like growing this beyond myself.
Yeah. Do you have thoughts about, I mean, do you, first of all, do you do like, so say locally you want to sell some trees, but the person's like, well, I don't really know how to do it. And, do you offer, or do you have thoughts about offering like, I'll install it for you, becoming like a part-time landscaper, or you just have no interest in that? That's physically
Yeah,
demanding work, but,
it is.
it's how a lot of nurseries supplement their business for sure.
Yeah. No, I was thinking about it recently. It is definitely something that I would like to do. I think I feel physically limited in that
Yeah.
realm. And just to be straight up, like I do have some chronic health stuff that I deal with, mostly like chronic migraines.
Okay.
And so it's hard for me, like there have been so many times where I've left the house to go do physical work somewhere else and I get a migraine while and it's just so tough to get through the day and get home. And so for me, it's challenging to commit to like doing work off of
Yeah.
the farm. I am interested in it, and it's an area that maybe it'd be nice to partner with people that want to do that more. Because
Yeah.
like I said, I've got some landscaping experience. I've got the construction experience. Like I do like
Yeah.
that, design, and
Hmm.
it's fun to see different environments, different places where
Yeah.
people are trying to do different things, and so I'm stimulated by it. But I haven't really, I don't feel like I'm ready to do a whole lot of
Yeah.
it right now. Yeah,
Well, I was thinking also in terms of, you mentioned like if more people kind of, associate with the business, like making it more of a cooperative model. And, you could have cooperative, people helping to grow trees, but also, there's kind of the economies of not of scale, but of scope, right? So you can kind of
yeah,
like, collaborate with people who are doing installs in landscaping companies, or people who are making compost, right? Or foresters who are, generating mulch, right? Like it seems like there's a lot of ways, if not to formally incorporate them in the business, to make kind of a more of a community economy.
yeah, definitely. I'm really fired up on all that, and like,
Hmm.
so we're trying to do more of that, and where we live near Martinsville, it's pretty rural, and we're eventually trying to get maybe like 30, 40 minutes more north of where we're at now. I want to get kind of higher up in the mountains, but there's
Yeah.
also more population there towards Roanoke, Blacksburg.
Hmm.
And Roanoke specifically, there's a really cool cooperative that's doing like composting in the city. They go around and collect food scraps and compost, and so we're definitely exploring ways that we can all support each other there. And so hopefully there's a lot of that to come. If anyone's listening and is in the area and wants to talk, hit me
Yeah.
up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mentioned in the email, I might ask you a question about kind of the bigger picture of like society. So our podcast is called Doomer Optimism, and kind of the premise behind it is that we recognize for a lot of reasons that our civilization is kind of, not sustainable, whether it's, for various biophysical reasons, political reasons, et cetera. And so it's easy in today's society to become a doomer, right? A lot of people are miserable, mental health, they hate their jobs, all of these things. So there's a lot of reasons to become a doomer. And so our premise was like, well, there are reasons to be a doomer and you should not ignore them or be naive about them. But once you kind of metabolize that information, then what, right? Holding up in your basement until the end is not a very good, viable strategy. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy at the end of the day. And so, like, let's find ways to be optimistic. And for us, a lot of it has just been like, what practical things can you do in, at your own place or in your community, and a very kind of, local oriented and stuff. Yeah. I'm curious to ask your question of like, what is your diagnosis of like the doom? And then what is your diagnosis of the optimism?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's one that I think about pretty much every day.
Mhm.
The way that I see it, I don't consider myself a doomer. If you'd asked me a few years ago, I would have said like, absolutely, I'm an optimist. And I feel like I've softened a little bit on the optimism, but I'm definitely not a doomer. And
Mhm.
and I kind of look at it like, I feel like what it would require for us as a culture to kind of transcend our issues, our climate issues, our culture issues, all this stuff. And not to like there's going to be suffering at some point no matter what we do. But like to transcend these big crises that we're facing and build a better world, what it would take to do that, I think is trivial. Like I think we have the material, we have the knowledge, we have what we need to do it. The problem is that we can't all get on the same page and
Yeah.
we can't and so like to me it's like it's very uplifting to say like, okay, it's not this big unsolvable problem. It's not like we're screwed until we get some sort of technological savior. It's like we could, we would have to make some sacrifices, but it's not dramatic as people think it is. So it's uplifting to feel that, but I think because of how hard it is both currently and historically for us to come together,
Mhm.
I do think that suffering is going to increase for most of the world population before it gets better. So I think we are in for some rough times. I think there's a lot of really good momentum towards more fulfilling stuff. And so much of it for me is around food. I think, you know, there's no one solution to all of this, but I think that food has a role to play in almost every crisis that we face right now. And so, like, for me, it's very uplifting to be in agriculture and like trying to change our relationship to food and to land. It gives me a lot of hope and meaning. But yeah, I definitely don't want to shy away from like, I do think it's going to continue to get crazier and crazier,
Yeah.
at least for a little bit. Yeah. Before it gets better. I mean, who knows? We'll see. I also think like the thing that's going to undo us, if something undoes us, it's probably not going to be something we predict. There's a lot of things that we can predict. It's easy to get scared about potential catastrophes, but it's also like there's probably a lot we're not thinking about too. That's so anyway, but
Yeah.
those are some of my thoughts.
Yeah. And do you see kind of what you're doing as, kind of, let's say the seed of, whatever, wherever we're moving towards, if things shake out in the long term and, move on a better trajectory, like I imagine you see kind of what you're doing of like, okay, like tree crops are massively underutilized in our landscape. They used to be a much bigger part of the landscape pre-European colonization, right? Tree crops were a huge part of people's livelihoods. In other parts of the world, they have been for a long time. And it seems like we've just kind of forgotten about them, right? We've kind of decided to grow our carbs in monoculture, 1,000-acre corn plots and all of this stuff. And, there's ways to get a lot of these nutrients through trees that also have so many other benefits. That would be my answer to my question to you. But how do you think about it?
Yeah, I do. I definitely see what I'm doing is like I'm trying to plant the seeds for the future that I actually want to live in.
Yeah. Literal and
And
metaphorical. Yeah.
literal and metaphorical.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, I really try to see what I'm doing through relationship. So like my relationship to the trees that I'm growing, to the trees in the landscape, to the people and all the other, life in the landscape. And yeah, as you were talking there, the thing that came to my mind, it's so funny how as a culture, like we ignore things and actively like push things away. Like we live in a forest on the
Hmm.
East Coast and the Midwest. Well, a prairie and forest, savanna and all that, but like predominantly nut and fruit bearing trees here. And yet we turn the West Coast into a monoculture of like almonds and stuff like that and walnuts when it's like we could be growing all that stuff here. And so that it blows my mind the lost potential and the yeah, just like not wanting to acknowledge what's here, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, trying to think of other questions kind of maybe specific to your operation. What haven't I asked? Like what parts of your kind of day-to-day life and nursery work that we haven't talked about that you feel like is important to
Hmm.
mention?
Yeah, well, so I guess there's two things that pop in my head. One is just there's like with anything you do in life, but especially with plants, there's
Mhm.
endless nuance. And so like
Yeah.
I felt really empowered by the folks who are on YouTube sharing their nursery experience to get
Mhm.
started. And what I
Yeah.
have learned is that, at least for me, like I have to do it in order to
Hmm.
learn. And there's just so many little, like as you start doing it, there's like a million questions that come up for every step of the process: digging, sowing seed, processing seed, all that stuff. So no one specific question that we didn't answer, but just to let folks know, like there's just expect the
It's a learning
unexpected.
process. Yeah.
Yeah, it's gonna be a process. The other thing is, like, there's a lot of what I do that's not financially super tied into the nursery, but for me, it's
Hmm.
like the whole lifestyle thing. It's all one thing to me, like the nursery, the garden, we've got chickens,
Hmm.
and the foraging and the seed saving. And so yeah, again, it's not like a one specific question thing, but just like there's a lot of stuff we haven't talked about how I'm tending my garden to try to like support local insects, but also give me the
Hmm.
food that I want, and like how we use the compost from the chickens in the nursery and all sorts of, stuff like
Hmm.
that. So there's a lot of other things going on
Yeah.
yeah, just part of it. Yeah.
So it's kind of, I mean, and I've definitely got that sense from other, like Sean Edible Acres or Twist Tree or others, that it's an integrated lifestyle, right?
Yeah.
It's,
Yeah.
the nursery is just a way to be able to, make a living doing it, but it really is a lot of, what people care about is not just growing trees for shipping or whatever, right? It's so many other
Yeah.
things. Well, yeah, do you want to talk a little bit about your kind of your chicken composting operation and supporting wildflowers? Anything particular that is
Yeah.
exciting to you right now?
Yeah, well, compost is a big deal to me. I mean, I think, when I first got started in all this stuff, one of the first places I landed was the Soil Food Web School. I'm not sure if you're familiar, like Dr. Lane Ingham and that whole. And I'm not like a super strict, hardcore follow everything that they say, but a lot
Hmm.
of what they say is pretty informative to how I garden and farm, and so like yeah, I make a lot of worm compost. Like I'll use the chicken litter, and I'll let it age and then feed that to worms. And I use that as like my main inoculant in the
Hmm.
garden and in the nursery. And I feel like that usually when I see healthy plant growth, like I attribute a lot of it to that.
So
And
a worm bin is just you have like a bucket and you put kind of things that they can eat in there, and you basically let them multiply, and then you make like tea out of it, or do you want to describe
I
a little?
used to do a lot of. I never did tea. Tea is like so involved because you have to brew it for a length of time, which just me. It's not like tea you drink where it's hot water. But when they say brew, they
Mhm.
mean aerate it and kind of keep it mixing and aerating for like
Yeah.
12, 24 hours. And so it's just a lot of. It's a whole process.
Mhm.
Tea is, and it's easy to mess up because it's easy to get the wrong types of organisms growing in there and spread pathogens around. It can work really good, and it's a good way to take a small amount of compost and multiply it to a large area.
Mhm.
But since I'm doing such a small area, I typically just apply the compost like a handful. If
Mhm.
I'm planting a seed or a transplant in the garden, I'll do a handful. If I'm planting a tree in the landscape, I'll do a nice
Mhm.
handful or two. When I'm
Yeah.
sowing my nursery beds, I'll do like a top dress, like a half inch or something like that with
Yeah.
some really good like worm compost.
So worm compost is just regular compost, but with a lot of worms in it, and worms just
Yeah.
do really great stuff to the material.
And I'm pretty casual about it. Like people that sell worm compost, they have like
Mhm.
their flow through worm bins set up so they're like pretty sure that all of that material has passed through worms. Whereas for me, it's like some buckets with holes in them that have a lot of worms, and like they've probably processed most of the material, but maybe not all of it.
Yeah.
And yeah, so it's basically like I pre-compost like either the chicken manure with wood chips that just sits for a while, or I mix up
Yeah.
wood chips and food waste, let it sit
Yeah.
for a little while, and then once it's kind of like once you can see it's starting to turn into soil, it's starting to decompose pretty thoroughly, then I throw that in a bin with a bunch of worms, let it sit for like
Mhm.
a month or so, and then I, just take it out of there. And you can kind of watch where the worms go. They'll go where the food
Mhm.
is. So once you see them migrate from one area into another, the place they just came from is probably ready to apply to the
Yeah.
plants. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Kind of a general theme. I think we've talked about it a bit, but it's just being able to like a lot of questions arise, and also like the model of like just a lot of small growers. The thing that's really exciting to me about that is that just everybody's kind of doing their own little experiments, right? And it's not like one strict formula that if you don't get right, everything's gonna go wrong. It's like you have to, based on your contextual factors, you have to see what works for you, and you have to try things. And to me, that I mean, that's very exciting. Like maybe not to the personality type that just likes to follow a cookbook or strict rules. That'll probably drive them crazy. Being your own kind of scientist and artist and innovator, I think that's a pretty exciting part of the process, or it sounds like it.
100%. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, 100%. That's the only way I would wanna have it, and I can understand people want more clear instructions sometimes, and
Yeah.
that's totally okay, but yeah, I'm excited about the experimenting and
Right.
context is really everything, everyone's context is unique. Yeah, definitely, definitely.
I wanted to ask you about, because this comes up a lot. Like, well, when you say you're going to start a nursery, the first thing that people come to people's minds is like, okay, you're going to need to build a big greenhouse.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
that's certainly true for annual vegetables, probably. It's for trees, I think the thing that's exciting to me is like, I feel like I could get started at least part time with almost like just very little uh, capital investment. A greenhouse would be helpful for a lot of things, but you don't actually need to build a greenhouse right away to start a nursery. Right? And
yeah,
that kind of, I think, it kind of blew my mind, and it almost made it seem like more possible that I could get into this, with just
yeah.
limited time and resources. But I think it's just a lot of people. If you say, "Oh, actually, I'm not," I think I'm not going to start with a greenhouse. They're like, they look at you kind of funny, like
They
that.
look at you funny.
Something.
Yeah.
Yeah, you want to talk about kind of the role of the greenhouse in your operation, when you use it, when you don't, stuff like that.
Well, up until this year, I didn't have one, and
Mhm.
arguably, I still sort of don't have one.
Yeah.
We built one at my girlfriend's house, a small one. We just, like, with scraps, like, we bought some cattle panels and some old lumber and kinda just rigged together this little it's probably, like, 16-foot long
Yeah.
by maybe, like, 8 feet wide, and we did that because I wanted to start seeds early to be able to have
Mhm.
potted plants available at the farmer's market. So,
Mhm.
like, if you wanna the way that I see the greenhouse, if you want to have potted plants available that are large
Yeah.
for, like, that May timeframe for local people,
Yeah.
it is you kinda need a greenhouse, but if we're
Mhm.
talking about, like, most of the trees that I didn't do any tree stuff in that. It was all, like, herbaceous
Yeah.
wildflowers that I started because I wanted to be able to have, like, mint and, like, asters and
Mhm.
stuff available, right? And a lot of annual vegetable people will start all their veggies like, if you buy veggie starts in the spring, they got started in a greenhouse.
Yeah. Yeah.
The only other place that I could see greenhouses being helpful for tree stuff, and again, we're in the Southeast, it may be a
Yeah.
different further north that you go, but if you're doing trees in pots and you want to overwinter those pots, and especially if in those pots are grafted trees,
Yeah. Yeah.
it can be helpful to have the greenhouse to overwinter them because
Mhm.
when the tree is in the ground, like my bare root trees, they're healed into the ground. You have the thermal battery of the earth. When it's a pot, just like sitting up on top of the ground, it can get a lot colder, and so you can have dieback and stuff. Now, I've
Mhm.
gotten around that in the past, but I have all my potted plants, and I just pile a ton of
Mhm.
leaves over top. I just like bury them in a leaf mountain, basically.
Mhm.
And that works the same as the greenhouse to prevent them from getting too cold or too dry. And I think specifically, like, so I'll just give one more example. Like, I grafted persimmons for the first time this year.
Mhm.
And just because of how busy I was, I didn't do it at the right time of year. I was late by like a month and a half. And so
Mhm.
they took, but they haven't had enough time to really harden up and form like wood, like really tough woody tissue.
Yeah.
And so I'm pretty certain that they will be very easily killed by frost.
Mhm.
So I took them, and instead of putting them in a greenhouse, I'm just putting them in my parents' garage, which is unheated but attached to the house. So it'll keep them dormant. They won't freeze too hard. And if I had a greenhouse, I probably would just stick them in there. But it's like for
Yeah.
the quantity of trees that I have, it's like I'll just put them in the garage. It's like 10 trees, and they're all healed into one pot, and it's so
Yeah.
yeah.
I have a very specific question that I'm thinking about right now. In terms of stratifying seeds, you don't really, once your seeds germinate, you put them in an air-prune box or a bed or something, and you don't want to do that probably until frost has passed. Do you have an issue of like stratifying seeds and that they germinate too early and then figuring out where to put them?
Yeah, I definitely have had that problem. I've encountered it in all sorts of ways. So like sometimes they'll germinate in the fridge in a bag. If you're not watching, like I've had the June berries and wild plums that germinated in like December.
Yeah.
And that is a situation where a greenhouse would be nice because you could just plant them in the greenhouse in a pot or something, and they would grow slowly with the lower light, but they would at least have enough warmth to like grow. And again, I've had to just like start them, in a windowsill or like, put them in the garage or like, I have friends who have greenhouses, and so to say like, "Hey, can I put like one big pot with a bunch of seedlings in your green?" Like, that's no problem. Whereas like if my whole business was based on needing to do that, it would, yeah.
Yeah.
I've also seen it with like when I store seed outdoors over winter, like if I store them in a bucket with some holes drilled in, like I do this a lot for black walnuts, and then I go to dig them in the spring because I want to plant them. I'll go dig them in March, and sometimes like half the walnuts have germinated already, which is a challenge because you don't want to break that taproot that they've already started to put out. And I guess that there's a lot I could say about it. That
I've heard that you can cut the roots to like an inch or something.
you can. It's not that's the main thing I was going to try to say is like you can damage those roots or cut them, and they'll usually grow through it. It might not be ideal, but they'll probably be fine. So I don't stress too much when I see that. It's just you have to go slower because they can get all tangled. And what I'm not sure about is what causes that early germination. My guess is it's some combination of temperature and moisture content. And so like I'll see a lot of people up north who like dig a hole and put their bucket of stratifying seeds in the hole and cover it up with mulch. I did that in North Carolina. Luckily, I decided to check on them midwinter, like January. And I pulled a bucket out, and it was like sopping wet because our groundwater is so high at that site in the wintertime. So I was like, okay, so what I moved to is instead of digging a hole, I would just put them on the ground surface and cover them with a pile of wood chips to avoid that kind of drainage. So, and I think that being so wet might have influenced some of them to wake up earlier that spring. So that and this is kind of what I mean with all there's just a million little nuances of like, how exactly do you want to handle the material and what happens? And yeah.
And at your side, again, something that worked for somebody else might not work for you. And so you have to constantly be thinking of other ideas. Yeah, this is Nick. I don't have anything else in particular. I don't know. Do you have, before we wrap up, do you have any other, you want to give like a sermon about,
About
anything in particular?
No, there is something on my mind actually, which I think will be good to end on. Most of my work to date has been growing the trees in the nursery, growing a garden. I have the chickens. I do a lot of foraging. The thing that I am really looking forward to in the future doing more of is more experience with maybe not totally mature, but trees that are really in good production. And I just want to kind of share some hype about that for people that want to get interested. Like there's a lot of trees out there that don't have human beings paying attention to them. And so like wherever you are, if you start looking, there might be really excellent trees in your neighborhood or in your ecosystem that are looking for human companionship, that are looking for someone to like, those persimmons are really good. They're better than all the other trees around here. And so like, just to kind of inspire folks to go out and look, and also to every time that I get to go to one of these like orchards, like the Hershey nursery, where there's a ton of these like really high quality persimmons and walnuts and all this sort of stuff. Like anytime I go see the trees in person, it's just really, it's life altering. It's fulfilling. And just, so I am really looking forward to all the observations you get to make when you see like all these different high quality trees growing together in an orchard context. It's just, it's really powerful. And
Really
so
see the
I'm excited.
potential of what this could become by
Yeah.
seeing these mature systems.
Yeah. And so if you have a chance to go to one, I highly, the Hershey site you can visit, or you can reach out to other people that have, established like England's Orchard down in, I want to say they're in Kentucky. Like there are, I wish it was more popular. It's hard to get to some of these sites, but they do exist if you want to visit them. Yeah. Yeah.
Nice. There's one more thing I've been thinking about that I'd like to get your take on. So, my place right now, we're again, most of our land is like pasture land, and up until last year, I've been just having it hay and stuff. And this year, I brought some sheep into it and started planting out kind of in the middle of the field, not just on the edges. And so, but I've been having this kind of conflict of like, do I want to orient this more towards a silvopasture system or more towards a food forest system? And of course, you could say, well, why not both? But there does, at least, my limited experience, there seems to be a little bit of a trade-off. Whereas, like, if you're doing like a food forest system, like edible acres with really dense plantings and stuff, then having sheep or goats or something in the landscape might be very difficult, right? Whereas if it seems like silvopasture needs an open spacing system, and so there seems to be kind of a trade-off there. Like, do I want to go more towards like a densely planted food forest or a mature silvopasture, more open system? And of course, I'm sure there's innovative ways to kind of do both. Somebody suggested to me the other day, like these kind of alley rows where, in the rows it's really densely planted, but then you have like pasture in between or something. You kind of get a bit of both. But I'm curious, well, one, if you have thoughts, wherever you end up landing, where you're gonna forever home, and pending there's enough land and everything, like, are you interested in like bringing in like ruminants into the landscape? And two, how do you think, have you thought about that trade-off, or does it make sense to you?
Yeah,
Planning that
definitely.
way.
Definitely. I think, well, for me personally,
Mhm.
I'm definitely interested in sheep. I had some experiences, basically farm sitting for some friends in North Carolina that had
Yeah.
sheep in a
I saw that video
silvopasture.
too, which is why one of the reasons
Yeah.
why it came up in my mind. Yeah.
Yeah, and that was a pretty profound experience, and, so the problem for me is that, like, I got a cat trying to step on the keyboard here. The problem for me is that I don't eat a ton of red meat personally.
Yeah.
So, like, the chickens that I have, it's really easy for me to get excited about the chickens because, like, I do eat chicken and I do eat eggs.
Mhm.
For sheep and cows and stuff, it's like I don't utilize a ton of that meat, so I don't really have I mean, obviously, I could get into selling it at the farmer's market or whatever,
Mhm.
but so we're just so sheep. So I am interested in sheep. The way that I look at it is largely scale. So like for like less than an acre roughly, I think is really
Mhm.
good for like a food forest that's going to be intensely managed and really diverse cover. And I think once you get kind of beyond that half acre
Mhm.
to an acre, it's challenging to maintain that level of not to say that you can't have diversity at a bigger
Mhm.
scale, but it has to be to some extent simplified, I think, or just a lot of people on the landscape. And so I think the main benefit to me of silvopasture is if you want to have these trees at a larger scale. So like
Yeah.
they're really good at supporting the health of the trees if
Mhm.
their grazing is managed properly.
Yeah.
They can just kind of help boost the fertility of the pasture and the orchard, in general. I do like to think also that fire can be a good tool as well, and it can be in combination with animals, or it could be instead of animals. Fire moving periodically through
Mhm.
the landscape with these
Mhm.
trees can be like I think Badgerstedt has done some of that. This is the group that they've done a lot of breeding on hazelnuts and chestnuts and actually and hickories too, I believe. And they I think have done some controlled burns through their orchard in the summer prior to
Interesting.
harvest because that's one of the
Yeah.
things you run into is like you've got these trees, you want there to be plants growing underneath them. We don't want to do bare soil, but then plants grow. And so when you want to harvest, especially nuts and things that fall to the ground, you need to mow the grass somehow. And so either having
Mhm.
like a timed animals moving in, which can be challenging because they deposit manure, which can be a pathogen issue. So the timing
Mhm.
is important there, but or you have fire move
Yeah.
through, or you have to mow,
Mhm.
or some combination. So I definitely see the animals as a very useful tool, and I do eat some red meat. It's not like I eat none. So like it is, I do want there to be some animals around
Yeah.
for that purpose. But yeah, I mostly see it as a scale thing, like the the
Mhm.
the real small scale, as diverse as physically possible. As you get bigger, and
Mhm.
simplifying to some extent. And yeah, having the animals or fire or some combination.
Right. Right. Yeah. Okay. Well, one more question. Just they keep popping up. Cut me off if you need to go.
No, I'm good. I'm good. Yeah.
How do you manage when you're planting out kind of at your place? How do you manage or think about deer pressure? Because that's a big, like a big challenge with, say, trying to create a whole guild around a tree is that, well, if you don't fence it or protect it somehow, like the guild is just going to get stomped on and eaten up and stuff. And there's creative ways, like certain, that people address this. planting certain kinds of plants around the trees that repel deer and things of that nature. But oftentimes I just end up getting welded wire fence and a T-post, and I hate doing that. It's expensive. It seems to limit the opportunities for creating more elaborate guilds. But yeah, I don't know, how do you think about that and manage that?
Yeah, no, it's a challenge. Well, one thing I'll say on the welded wire and the T-post, because I do that a lot. What I have started moving, I like to have the bottom of the fence elevated off the ground a little bit so that if I
Mhm.
need to like weed whack under the fence
Yeah.
to be able to prevent, because the problem is that vines that you don't want will like poison ivy or something
Right.
will climb it, and then it's just a mess to get it out of there. So
Mhm.
that elevation can help in case you need to terminate any vines underneath of the welded wire. But deer are a challenge, and it's like there's the structural stuff that we need to do.
Mhm.
Like we need to incentivize more deer harvesting and get the population
Yeah.
in balance, And
Right.
it's not like I'm just heartless towards deer, but it's like, and I like to tell
Yeah.
like the deer are suffering too. It's not just that we and the trees and the forest are suffering. Like the deer are sick in some places from overpopulation and not having access to enough food, and
Mhm.
so like you know, it is taking life. I'm not taking away from the fact like killing deer is you got to kill them. It's taking a life. But like I think that is what we need to do to support the ecosystem and us and
Yeah.
the deers to live better. But
So we need
electric,
more hunters,
we need
basically.
more hunters. And I am trying to live by my, I've never hunted before and I'm going out this year. We just got a crossbow and I'm trying to get
Sweet.
good and yeah, we're going to go out and
Nice.
hopefully do it. So
Mhm.
yeah, we need a lot more of that. I'm really liking electric fence lately, and so I think when I get to my, forever home, I will always do some amount of the welded wire cages just because in some places it's convenient. You can set it up for like one tree. But I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna just use hot wire like poly wire and set up rows and just like totally narrow row like so maybe like 5, 6 feet wide by like 100 feet
Mhm.
long and plant my trees and plant whatever other plants I want in there with them and hopefully keep the deer out with the hot wire. The wire itself is not that expensive. Once you just need a good energizer, that's the expensive part, and it's pretty easy to
Right.
set up. So that's something I want to try more. And now, for one row of 100 foot, not a big deal. Once you want to do a
Right.
whole orchard, though, it can get expensive really quick. And so, yeah, it's I don't have a lot of great tips on deer other than like we got to hunt them more, and for right now we've got to exclude them. Some people like the tree tubes; they're pretty cheap. I don't have a ton of experience with them. The thing I don't like about tree tubes is like there's no way for a bird to get in there and eat the bugs. So if you get a bad bug
Right.
outbreak, like
Yeah.
so
I feel I don't like them because I feel like they spoil the tree too much, and they
yeah,
they
you're
don't
all
flop
like
around in the wind as much, and they're not as strong
yeah.
once you take them off.
Yeah, I personally don't like them a whole lot, but I can't say I have a ton of experience with them. And for some people in their context, they like them and it works. So there's different ways to approach it. The other thing is like yeah, it depends how much control you want over the situation. Like I'm really excited about direct seeding stuff, which
Mhm.
is in a way pretty counterproductive to me as a nursery because it's like telling people how to do this without buying trees.
Right. Right.
But I'm really hype about it because it's like a tree that's grown from seed in place is going to be the healthiest possible tree. It's going to be healthier than
Yeah.
any transplant. And so I'm really big into like gathering a ton of seed, preparing like a whole row where you want the trees to be, or even just one spot. You want to grow an oak tree here. Okay, I'm gonna dig with a shovel, loosen the soil, put like 50 oak seeds down, cover them with a bunch of mulch, and then hopefully enough sprout that the deer can browse some of them and it's not a huge deal, and over time
Right.
you cut it back to one and you get one tree. So that it can work, but again you have almost
Yeah.
no
That's
control over
nature's
what
OG
happens.
design. Trees
Yeah.
trees give out way too many seeds because most of them don't survive. Yeah. So mimicking that. Well, Nick, this has been great. I've really enjoyed your channel, and it's helped inspire me to think about plans of my own to move in this direction. I hope other people also get inspired. And also, we're not that far away from each other. Uh,
Yeah,
I'm in Watauga County, West North Carolina, kind of the northwest part of the state. I think we're probably maybe like 2 or 3 hours, away from each other. So, be nice to chat again sometime. Maybe meet up in person sometime. But it's just
absolutely.
it's just a great honor to meet you, and I really love what you're doing. And
Yeah,
I hope,
yeah,
by the way, people want to follow up and look into what you're doing. We have livingsoiltreefarm.com.
yeah, yep,
And we also, if you type in Living Soil Tree on YouTube, it'll come up right away. You know, give Nick some support. He's doing great work. At least like and subscribe his YouTube channel, but also check out his nursery and see what he's got going on. And You seem to be a person who's pretty open to like people want to email you and pick your brain, stuff like that. It seems like you're open to that. As
Definitely.
well.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Hit
Cool.
me up. I love to hear from you. Yeah.
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 Well, great. Well, good luck with this crazy November season, and with all of your stratifying and planting and stuff. And thanks for taking the time.
Yeah. Yeah. No, hey, thanks for reaching out, and I look forward to talking more. So yeah.
Cool.
Wish
Sweet
everyone a
man.
happy fall.
Until next time. Take care. Bye.
Yep. See ya.